So, hi everyone. This is a quick demo of the Chat with Siri app. Basically, this is a text-to-speech app where you pass in a text and it returns back some text response and audio. Everything here is powered by Nextjs, OpenAI for all the functionalities, AI functionalities, and ElevenLabs for all the audio functionalities. And yeah, basically you get like a change voice section, the chat area, and then the chat input. So you have a bunch of voices, like 40 plus. And as I mentioned in the tutorial, you could have both automatically generated voices, and you can also have cloned voices and synthetic voices. So for example, you can see I have a voice with my name here, which actually isn't cloned, but like I just picked a couple of options and I generated it. So the default voice is Mira, and then we can ask it the question like, who are you? And then it takes a little
I am Siri,
while. And
your virtual assistant here to help you with any questions or tasks you may have.
So yeah, so basically this kind of like just simulates Siri in a sense where it's more or less that you ask Siri a question, and rather than Siri just respond, then it's more of conversational, so both text and audio. And yeah, you could replay
I am
the
Siri,
last
your virtual assistant
audio
here to help you with any questions or tasks you may have.
And yeah, we could change the voice, probably pick, let's see, I pick this voice, and then I ask it another question, like, what can I have for dinner if I had rice for lunch? Okay, so
you could have stir-fried vegetables, grilled chicken, or a hearty soup for dinner after having rice for lunch.
Okay, that sounds interesting. I feel a bit hungry. So yeah, that's pretty much everything around the app itself. You could choose a couple of more voices. You could also start a new chat, and then we could ask it something like, who created GitHub? Yeah, GitHub usually has, I always put that hitch
GitHub
there.
was created by Tom Preston Werner, Chris Wanstrath, and PJ Hyatt in 2008.
So perfect. And that's pretty much everything about the app. So the other side for this is, the ability to set your API key. Given the demo is public and just to avoid cost and any overload, I allow users to put in their API keys just to play around with it. This is just a very simple demo to get to, understand more of how large language models work and how to try out the new features in Nextjs 14. So basically you can input your API keys here. I'm trying not to click on them because then it would reveal my own API keys. And then there's a link to the guide that, shows you and talks more about all of this. You could also update at any point. So I'm going to delete the current API keys we have here. So that's all deleted. So now I can come here. It's all open. So if I try to say, how are you? It's going to pop that up again. You need to put in an API key. If I put in wrong API keys, it saves. And then, if I ask that question again, it's going to return, 2 errors for me because you see, both of those are wrong. And then it gives you this. So kind of works fine. On mobile, it's also fairly okay. So these are the errors because, the request failed. Works pretty fine also. And that's that. I don't think there's anything else on the app. So yeah, that's it. So let's do a quick walkthrough of the code. So basically, before we do that, I'll probably just run you through the architecture. So we have a simple web app here. When a user enters the text, we send a request to OpenAI. OpenAI returns some response, and then we pass that response to ElevenLabs, and then we return that back to the user. So I have 2 API routes here. So in Nextjs 14, there is a new feature called route handlers, which is a replacement for API routes in the pages. If you're familiar with how API routes work with pages, and you know what I'm talking about. So route handlers is just a new way to do that in Next 14. So basically I just have this stuff here just to check if the app is in production, so I can use your API keys and not the one on local. If it's in development, you just use your local keys. And then there is a hack here first to update the prompt. So basically it says, imagine your Siri, Apple's digital assistant, and the user asks you a question. That will be the question from the input, generate a suitable response with less than 100 characters. So basically we make a post request to OpenAI's endpoint, and then we pass in the token. You can easily get your token. So if you go to OpenAI and you log in, you get these two options. You're not going to ChatGPT, so you go to API, and from here you can click on the API keys. I'll try not to click it so it doesn't reveal mine, but yeah, that's how you get your API keys. Quite similar also for ElevenLabs. And then you pass that somewhere in your EMB files, and we set a couple of options here. I did talk about them extensively in the tutorial, so you should read that if you haven't done that yet. So first we have the model ID, the maximum number of tokens, temperature, then the number of responses you want. So we're going to set as always to 1. A couple of AI apps you might have seen that returns like different options, maybe stuff like generate like a biography for me based off this different tone. So you might have options. So this is where those settings come in, and then we down passing the messages. So basically the message is a list of the entire conversation. For some kind of apps you might not want to have like a conversational chat area where you store every single chat message. So what that means is I just ask one question and it returns one question. But yeah, for something conversational, so that also chat OpenAI can learn from the previous responses. You can even try to build like a sequence and patterns, so you put that in a list. So basically we have an array of objects, and the role determines who's sending the message. It can either be user, system, or assistant. In this case, user would be myself, and system would be the AI chatbot, and then the content would be the content of the message. So we'll have this kind of array here in that sense. So that's what we pass in here. And then we check if there's an error, we return some response back to the user, and then OpenAI returns a data that looks like this. So if you read the tutorial, it looks like this. So basically what we need is in choices, and in this array we have this object, and then there is the message, and this is the content. So we pretty much just get the first elements there, and then we fetch the content, and then just trim any spaces there, and then that's that. We just return the output. That's that for the chat. And for speech is quite similar. We also set the same variable to check if it's production. We have the same logic here. We receive 3 things from the request: the API key, the message, and voice. Quite similar to that for chat. And then this time around we're using ElevenLabs TypeScript SDK to run the entire logic. And then we pass quite similar stuff here. If you look at the tutorial, I did mention quite a number of them. So we pass in the voice, pass in the model ID, and the voice settings, text, and a bunch of other stuff which are all documented in the tutorial. So we pass that in, and then so this will return a blob file, and then we return that to the UI. So now let's go straight to see what that code looks like. We have a bunch of components and a couple of states here to store different stuff, which are all documented in the tutorial. You can take a look at that, so I don't take much of your time now. And then so first thing first is we try to set up a function to call our chat API. So as you can see, we do make that request here. We pass in every single thing we need to pass in, and then if the response is 401, which would be an invalid key response, we return a toast alert. We do same for ElevenLabs, and we save that. So basically we have a chat input which includes the form. So this entire function runs when that form is submitted. You can find that in the chat input components, which pretty much looks like this. Enter your message, on submit, it runs this. What else is going on here? We disable the form if it's empty, There's a loading state here to check if it's submitting. So that's that. And if you look into the send message logic, first things first is that if it's production also, I try to just pop up the model again so it doesn't run anything unless you have your keys. And then if it doesn't, then we try to start the entire logic. First things first is that we create the array of the entire chat messages. Everything here is stored in local storage. So by the way, I forgot to mention that in the demo. So if you refresh the page, you still get, all your chats, you get the voice you selected. So it's pretty much just everything running on your client. So we pass in all the previous messages first of all, and then you pass in the role of the user and the contents from the form. And then we then try to call the API here. That's the function we created earlier. And then we do the same for the audio, but passing in the response from OpenAI. And then when we get that response, we use the file reader function in JavaScript to generate the source URL for the audio file. It's pretty much going to be an audio element. And then, we have a bunch of this code here to generate that. And then we pass the source, and then we also automatically play the audio. Immediately, the source is generated. And then, we then update the array of objects we have and also add the response from OpenAI. And yeah, that's pretty much it. We have a couple of logic here, for example, to clear all the messages, which is pretty much just, removing, emptying the state for messages and then removing it from local storage. And then we have a utility function here that tries to get all the voices on ElevenLabs. We call that here, and then we run that stuff. And we have all the components here. So we have a store API keys, which is the first layer of the page. We have the chat voice, we have chat messages, chat controls, and we just talked about chat input already. So if we try to take a look at them, this is what store API keys look like. So basically, we have let's start with the actual logic, which we have this whole thing trying to ensure that the model works fine here. And then, you input your API keys and then you save it. So one key thing you will observe here is that we are using the JavaScript, not JavaScript, by the way, we're using, where's this part? Oh, I think I passed it already. Okay, cool. So we have the action element, which is going to, it's running on this. So if you're familiar with server components and client components run on the rendered on the client, and server components are rendered on the server, and then it sends down to the client. Nextjs also has a new feature called server actions, which enables you to run different parts of your logic on the server and also include that in client components. So in this sense, we don't have anything that requires, everything is running on local storage. So I need the client to be able to access local storage. Else, I most likely would have, put this logic in an action file and, run that as a server action in this sense. But since I'm just doing local storage, so pretty much just create a function. We use the form data, which is a very good way to get data from a form. And then one of the very good use cases for server action I'll probably find myself using more would be for handling form and data mutations. So, and then I try to get both keys from the form, set the states, close the model, notify, and that's pretty much it. And then a couple of logic here to delete the keys, ask the user to confirm, and then the same thing, we just clear up the states and clear up local storage. And that's all that's going on for the keys, and a bunch of files which you can read to see how the moving parts are with styling with Tailwind. And then next we have the chat voice. Quite similar logic here. We have a select element and we have the voices, and yeah, that's pretty much it. And for chat messages, we have quite similar logic. So basically we receive the array of all the messages, and then we look through them and then render them based on the user type, and that's all that's going on here. And that's the entire project in nutshell. So you could have at it, play around with the stuff, take a look at the code on GitHub, and if you want to contribute, I do have a couple of stuff I want to experiment with and add. For example, as I mentioned in the tutorial, streaming response is something that is very key in a conversational chat like this, and I would want to look into more on that and see how I can include that logic here. Stream the responses from OpenAI, stream the response to the audio, and make the entire project a little bit more faster. And that's why this product is limited to 100 characters, because if we leave it empty, it's going to take a very long time to get responses. So for reduce latency there, we need to stream. It's something you find very common but for this use case, it works kind of fine. 100 characters, it gives you the best response, and you can use this for kind of a very, very conversational body chat in a sense. And then a couple of features here, so you could look at the project if you're trying to understand how Nextjs 14 works. So the project probably doesn't use most of the features you might be looking for yet, but it covers most of the generic stuff around server actions, route handlers, and all those cool stuff. So yeah, I think that's that. So probably in the nearest future, I might release a full-blown tutorial on how to build this entire stuff, probably. But for now, you have a tutorial. You could go read a entire tutorial. I did try to break down the moving parts and how I was able to build this, and the learning experience I had from trying to put all of this together. So I hope you find that insightful, and please consider subscribing to this channel. I'm hoping that in the next couple of time I would release more videos like this. I'm still trying to figure out what kind of videos I want to produce more. I would have more videos and shorts also, so more of stuff that I would want to teach first, and then I would figure out what people who listen would want to watch also. But for now, you could go have fun on my blog. I also have a newsletter where you could see a couple of my stuff. You should subscribe because you get more updates here from me. And yeah.